been a while, huh? Actually, for us to go live.
Been a long while. Oh my gosh, what like at least a couple months.
Yeah, yeah. It's it's been a journey, right? And I mean,
Uh,
you still post on your channel, I still post on mine, right? So it's not like we stopped being.
Well, yeah.
No, go ahead, Ashley.
Well, I was gonna say, like, all I've posted is shorts, at least for the last month. My life is like at the level form has really been all over the place. And as you can see, most people like Evelina's like, I'm not used to seeing you without a big wave behind you. As you can see, I've got like some sailboats behind me, but we're in a completely different location and we're officially beginning our travel journeys. So I'm so blessed that you and I were able to like get this to work. We've got internet speed. We're here
Yeah,
today to be with all of you, and we're so excited.
absolutely, 100%. So, what's the story today that we're debunking? Like, 'cause I know you love to talk about there is no stories. So let's start there. What's the topic? I guess maybe.
Well, money. I mean, you and I, again, Unleash Thyself podcast, amazing podcast. If you haven't checked it out, it's on Constantine's site. But we recorded 2 episodes just a few days ago, and we kind of started out in one area, and then we branched into money and the money stories we hold and how they kind of keep us limited, and how even in the movement today we're taught like you still need a money story. And I guess my response would be like, do you? Do you need a money story? Or is giving it a story, giving it weight, right? Like that pendulum you and I always talk about swings. It's like,
Yeah.
especially like in the personal development world today, a lot of what we're taught is just like, swing the pendulum the other way. That's the better way when it's still weight. So it's still causing this like unnecessary weight on whatever that is, whatever the story is, relationships, money, success, all the big taboo places.
You know what? That's an interesting point you bring up there. The weight on any story, really. I mean, we're talking about money right now, but here's what came up for me as you shared that. What makes it for you, or your understanding, a challenge to place weight on any of the stories? Either if it's good, bad, or indifferent, doesn't really matter. Why is it a challenge? Why is it a problem for the journey? Right? Because I'm assuming it keeps you in the ego more than not. Not assuming. I see it. I feel it. But I'm curious to see your take.
I think it makes it real. It makes it something real that really can impact you and cause distress or happiness. But the truth is nothing outside of you can do that, and nothing outside of you is, in my belief system, is actually real, is actually true. I think the only true thing is the loving awareness you are. So when we give it a story, good or bad, um we give it life, right? We give it life, which then gives it power over us, whether it appears in a positive manner or in a negative manner. um but that's the duality of it. So then in one moment it might be like, yes, my money story is bringing lots of money in, so it feels favorable, right? It feels
Mhm.
positive. But the downside is you're then making it real, meaning at any given moment it has this power to negatively impact you. And we see that all the time, right? We see it when, people go through bankruptcy, or they continuously obtain massive amounts of money, but it's never enough, right? Because the story you give it will always be shifted to that of something of discomfort, because the reality is true happiness doesn't lie outside of you. It can't be found in any of these things. And that's the only reason why we create stories, is because we believe happiness is located there, or discomfort, right? Either happiness or unhappiness is located in this object outside of me.
Yeah, because it makes sense, right? And you were talking about your journey when we're recording a podcast episode the other day, and how you were really successful a while back, right? Bringing lots of money. And so the story was good. But then, of course, that stopped for whatever reason. And all
Mhm.
of a sudden, that story changed. And now
Right.
it brought, may I say, misery with it until you realize what was going on.
Yeah, until I realized it was the misery I was experiencing was just the story I gave it. And the second, I mean, I remember I don't, the day where all of a sudden I just was like, if I just shift my story, I can still be broke in hundreds of, thousands of dollars in debt like I am, but not have to experience the misery. And that was the moment I was like, you can't pull blood from a turnip. It's a statement here in the States. And it really just means like you're kind of at this back against the wall moment. So why worry anymore? And the moment I released that story or any story, right, at that, it was so freeing. It just was like, money neither was good nor bad. It just was, and it was neither good or bad if I had it or didn't have it. It just was like this real peace and calm and knowingness that did not determine my truth either way. That didn't determine my worth, my
Your
love,
words.
my
Yes.
anything.
Yes, yes, yes. So how did you release it? Let's talk about releasing this because of course people watching now and even myself, I go through it. It's okay, it is easier than it sounds. It is simpler than it sounds, but it doesn't appear the way initially. And I have many examples in my life that I can reflect back on, but I'm curious to see your take. Like, how do you go from having a story, whatever good, bad, or indifferent it is, to releasing that story and just allowing it to just be?
Yeah. It's definitely a journey, and it's not easy, but it's simple. It's really simple, and what's simple about it is anytime you notice that something, specifically we're talking about money today, has a story or control over you through a story, or you're making it real, so you're suffering, right? Is you acknowledge it and you see it and you're like, oh, yes, this is a story. And you don't have to actually know what the exact story is. Sometimes you do, right? Sometimes it's brought forward, but to me it's really the moments of forgiveness then. And true forgiveness is acknowledging you have this story, and acknowledging it has no control over you, and then handing it over to, whatever you believe is greater than yourself, whether it's spirit, Jesus, God, Buddha, your highest self. The list goes on, the divine, right, that is greater than you, and hand it over and request the miracle, which is this shift in perspective. And you will have to do this over and over, and it comes quicker and quicker, and it gets less and less. But sometimes it kind of takes a back against the wall moment to start to realize that. And for me, with where my business was, it was a back against the wall moment. It was really a moment of I had nothing to give, and I had nothing more to lose, and everything to gain in the fact of my worldview, my perspective, my internal state of being. And
Yeah.
so then that's when I got the taste of it, right? So the moment I talk about my back against the wall moment was the taste. It kind of reminds me when people go to Burning Man and they do all these psychedelics and stuff. That is just a taste of what is possible if you do the unraveling of the ego, right? It is not a place you are meant to stay in through the use of those drugs. It's an opportunity to see what is possible when you do the work of unwinding from the ego. So to me, that's what I received, was a taste. And I got to experience for quite a period of time until money started to come back into my bank accounts. And then all the old money stories came back again. And but by that point I had tasted it. So I was like, ah, there's got to be a way to get there. And that was another moment for me that then the Course in Miracles found its way to me, and I started to understand what true forgiveness was, and just all the things started to align that supported me, encouraged me, and brought grand faith in my journey of releasing these stories. I mean, you've been a part of it.
Mhm.
The Patreon group has. So those are all the pieces I'm talking about that start to find their way. But you have to be open to this, right? It's not like a a formula. It's an
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love
Go
that
ahead.
actually. No, I was gonna say it's like that idea of the awareness, right? The psychedelic stuff, right? And I mean, for those that may not know, like on my path with my shamanic journey, I'm invited often to sit with plant medicine, and have these journeys where awareness is brought to my attention, right? Like I get to see, let's say, the bigger picture, if you may. But you can't be in that. You have to bring it back to your life and see how do you integrate those lessons. And it sounds like that's what you're talking about as well, minus of course the plant medicine in your case. But it's so powerful because once you have an example in your life, then you can make a choice to tap more into that. And an example I give you, this blew me away actually, and you kind of know the story. Back in January of this year, I was doing a breathwork meditation with a dear friend of mine, and it was a very intense breathwork. It was about an hour and a half long, using essential oils and a lot of other rituals. And there were two people doing energy work on me at the same time, and it was so powerful. I could not believe it. It's like I was watching a movie while doing that, right? And the movie was me talking to various, gods and angels and other beings. And I would get messages, I would see things, I would anyway go through that. And at the end, they were telling me, hey, now you will remember your healing abilities and your channeling abilities. And I remember, because I was conscious, right? It was just breath work, it was nothing else, just deep breath work. And I just laugh and I say, me as a healer, as a channeler, come on, let's be serious. And all they did was like, loving like all your guides are, whoever you believe in. It's like you already have examples in your life. You just have to look there. And then they pointed me to the examples where I've done that and not even realizing it, actually. So
Mhm.
now awareness came in, acknowledgement came in, acceptance came in, and then the path unraveled. So
Mhm.
what you're talking about resonates so deeply with me because then it's the same with the money story, right? You have examples because the story, like for example, I was on a journey last weekend to unpack more of my own money story, and mine is tied big time to my self-worth story. And here's the kicker, Ashley. What was revealed to me, which technically I had access to, I just never paid attention to it, was that my money story, like most other people, from what I've seen, is tied to the stories of other people in your life. In my case, it was my self worth story tied to the story of my mother, my grandmother, people that raised me. And it was shown to me how that was essentially taken on by my small child, my small version of me, or my younger version of me, and turned into my own story. Money is evil. It's hard to make money. Money is no good, right? So that side of it. And now that you mentioned this idea of like essentially looking at what's already been revealed and then just going deeper within it to release it, it makes so much sense because we have so many examples of it in our life. We just have to look or even
Mhm.
allow it to come through. I'm curious to see
Mhm.
what you think of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think all that is so beautiful and such beautiful remembrance was brought to you. And for me, I'm a firm believer we all have those capabilities of being
Yes.
healers and things. And it's really sad today that it's kind of being monopolized. I was talking to someone the other day because this person is paying an astronomical amount of money to get something channeled once a month. And not that it's bad, but I think the reason why we're willing to pay such high amounts is because we believe we don't have that ability and we want someone else. And what I hear, Constantine, is like you're really at this place in your journey of really fully accepting the truth of the oneness, right? The truth of how we are all tapped into one, because that's how you can heal and stuff, which I think is so beautiful.
Yes. Let me
Now
ask
on,
you that, actually,
oh,
because
yep,
I
go ahead.
think this is important for those listening as well. What you said, that it's I actually said that we all have these abilities, and I couldn't agree more. In fact, in my channeling, right, in my communications with my guides, with my angels, with my shamanic guides and my shamanic journeys, this is a statement that I'm reminded of a lot because in those journeys, my ego still kicks in. And I'm like, oh, I'm special because I have
Yeah.
healing abilities and I can heal. And I have proof because I was able to provide healing to my dog, to people in my life. And it's like, it blows me away. But guess what?
Mhm.
My guides always remind me, I'm just a conduit for healing. The healing actually happens at the
At the
personal
level of the
level or
mind.
the animal, whatever you end up healing. So we all, and they also remind me that we all have these abilities. It's just that the majority of us, like the vast majority of us, don't even realize that we have them. And the ones that do realize that maybe there is something there, they don't know how to tap into those gifts. And that's what I'm fortunate enough to be able to explore right now to see, okay, well, how do I tap into those gifts more? And then raise awareness with others that they have those gifts. And to your point, like I was also the person that would go and pay someone to channel for me.
Mhm.
and now I have that ability to do it myself.
Mhm.
Does it mean it I shouldn't go to someone else to help me on the path? Absolutely not,
Mhm.
because there are certain things I do on my shamanic path that I can benefit from, but there are also things that others can help me with. Because what I've also realized, and my guides have shared, is that this is a journey that's not meant to be done alone. Yet alone
Mhm.
is how we actually figured this out.
Mhm.
That we're not meant to do this alone. So there's this
Mhm.
beautiful dance of like, yes, you have the gifts, and yes, you can tap into the gifts of others as you awaken yours, and as you even embrace yours and empower yours and go deeper on them. So I wanted to
Mhm.
emphasize that because I feel like it's so important to realize that regardless of who you are and at what stage you are in life, you have access to this.
Mhm. Yeah. And I agree with you 100%. Like everything is what I consider a placebo. So me having conversations with Constantine or Constantine doing Reiki on me helps to activate pieces in my mind or pieces in the mind, right? That cause
Yes,
healing within me. But I think the thing that I was trying to express, and I know you heard it too, Constantine, so I want to reiterate it to everyone, is that really when you're doing that, for in order for it to be the most beneficial is for you to know that it's you actually participating in the healing, right? Like there is not something special about this person outside of you. When you believe there's something special outside of them, then you're still playing in the ego. And even if they provide you any sort of level of healing, it's not going to be the expansiveness it can be. So you're all superheroes. Everybody is equally abundant and holy. And just maybe in this lifetime, you may not fully remember it, and that's okay. But just know that in other lifetimes you possibly were, doing these different things. But I
absolutely.
want to go back to the money piece because I
Yes, let's
had
go that.
this
Yeah.
this aha moment when you were speaking, because I always wondered how this interacted. Because what you were talking about was, you go back and you see how your money stories were adopted by those outside of you, right? By your family, your the society, whatever, had great impact on your money stories. Like you talked about your mom's fear of money and how that impacted you. But
Oh,
we're
well, let me
we're
actually add something that, as you are the saying, it's not necessarily the money. It wasn't even about the money story. It was about the worthiness story,
oh,
which
worthiness story.
then ties to the money. Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Whatever story it is. So, what again, we can fill in the blank: worthiness, money, success, because it's really all the same story if we go back to the shame and guilt of the initial separation. But what came to me, because I really see everything as a projection of my own internal mind, right? So Constantine is a projection, Patrick is a projection, that tree is a projection. So what that means is what I heard in the money story thing is that it's not that I learned it from my mom. My mom was always a projection of the piece of my mind, and I can see that piece of my mind in my mom. Does that make sense? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's the beauty when you start to see that everything is one, is that it's like, is it that movie like Inside Out or whatever, where all those little people
Yeah.
represent different pieces of the mind? It's very similar, but also that has a lot of ego, personal development flair on it, but very similar in the manner of, imagine this is just one big mind, and you're on this journey of healing this mind, and every interaction you have with another person is you seeing what's going on in the mind, and you can heal it. So like, it's not that I learned from my mom to be fearful of money or fear my worthiness. My mom was always a projection of the fear that was always there. It's just I'm able to witness it in her, right? In the projection that is her, which allows me to heal. And for me, what that does is it's a reminder that nothing outside of me is impacting me. It's all coming from within. And to me, that goes into this, what we like to talk about, Constantine, where life is happening to me, life is happening for me, and then where I say life is happening of me, right? It's happening of me, meaning coming from me. Like what I see is coming from me, and we all have access to that mind. So yeah, that came to me in the conversation, and some people might, their eyes might be rolling over right now because it's very deep metaphysical, right? If you're into the metaphysics, rewind and re-listen to this again, because it will definitely blow your mind at the metaphysical level of, yeah, that story was never learned. That was always the representation of that story within the mind. So
That's an
yeah.
interesting thought there, and
Because then it's not
I will
about
have.
giving it back to your mom, it's about bringing it back to the source, which is the mind, and then seeing it for the story it was, right? This is true forgiveness, and be like, oh, this is a story I think that can impact me, but I know it can't. Here you go, spirit, divine, whatever. Help me see differently. Help me shift my
Yeah,
perspective, and then
yeah.
you receive the miracle.
Because I wasn't even considering like it's about giving it back to the person you took it from. Absolutely not. I don't believe in that. But I love your perspective, and at the same time, what comes to me is that yeah, it's definitely not about giving it back to the person that gave it to you. And by the way, funny enough, recently, I don't know, maybe someone on my podcast or someone else I heard about this idea of them talking is like, oh, find out if it's your story, and if it's not, give it back to them. Ask them to take it
Mm.
back. And I'm like, that didn't sit right. And now the way you explained it, and it's like, oh yeah, I understand why it doesn't sit right, because it's not about giving it back. It's about understanding, well, seeing it for what it is.
And healing it
And
for both of you. That's the cool part. You can heal for both of you.
let's table the one, because I want to come back and see what how do you heal it for both of you. But I have an idea, because I see what's coming happening in my life.
Okay.
And as I heal mine, of course, it provides an opportunity for those around me to heal as well, because they talk about as within so without, right? So like whatever you have within is what you're projecting external of you and what you're attracting. So I can imagine like what you just said was in relation potentially to that, where it's like as you heal or whatever, release this aspect, forgive this aspect of yourself and let go of it and send it back to the mind in a way, then you give this opportunity to those around you to do the same thing through you
Mm,
for them.
mm,
That's what comes up for me right now.
mm. No, what I'm saying is we're connected as one, and it goes to the video I created a long time ago of, do people actually change, or our perception of them changes? When you no longer fear, I'm trying to think of like a really simple example. Um, well, it's like being cut off in traffic, right? If that morning you spilt coffee on yourself and you were running late and you get cut off in traffic, you are going to see that as like an upsetting, jerk, blah, blah, blah situation, right?
Sure, yeah, yeah.
Now, if you had an amazing morning, you're running early, you feel like the birds are singing, like a whole Cinderella moment where like the birds are singing, everything's beautiful, and someone cuts you off, you're not even going to notice they cut you off, because you are not reflecting that. You are not showing that reflection. So as you heal these money narratives, you no longer see them as as what you did before, which was attack. hmm You saw it as attack, a place of fear. That's
Mhm.
attack. You will now see it as the cry for love it is, and you will meet it with love. You won't even see it the way you saw it before, if that makes sense. And
It
and
does.
it's yeah, it's a completely different interaction, a completely different scenario, because you can't see what you cannot perceive what you are not reflecting or showing.
Mhm. So coming back to the money story with Dada, right? Like, so let's say in my case, right? I've tied it to a worthiness story. And I say, I mean, it's part that probably it's more than that, I would imagine. So now it's about how, as I'm unpacking this, right, as I'm going through it, it's about releasing that the burden it brings, releasing the story, and in doing so, then, like you said, you shift your perception around it, and it no longer holds any good, bad, or indifferent hold over you.
Mhm. But you're
Very
not
good.
doing the work. That's the thing. So I think that's a big like personal development thing, is where we think we're responsible to shift this perspective. But when we do the work to shift the perspective, it's really work in the ego to just shift the ego's perspective. But when you actually hand it over is the moments you really feel the release of the weight. And I know you've experienced this because you experienced this with your water, with the water scenario. You didn't spend a ton of time diving deep. I know it may seem like people you did, but you didn't. You had this like aha moment where your guides gave you this, which is really your highest self, or the
Yeah.
divine or whatever is out there is Constantine's guides. Um, and you accepted it for what it was. You didn't need to continue to unpack it because you knew your guides know best, right? So you just knew that that was what it was and you handed it back over. That is what I'm talking about. The ego loves to be analyzed like that. And that's why personal development is a bazillion-dollar industry right now, is because it's really the ego's way of making us believe that we are getting better, which in some aspect we are. Don't get me wrong, we're getting closer to truth. But the ego wants you to like analyze and analyze and analyze and analyze it because it keeps you in the ego. You can only analyze the ego, you can only see the ego if you're in the ego. So, like around here, if I go up to Patrick and I'm like, "You're in the ego right now," it's like a bunch of crap because that means I'm in the ego because I can only see his ego if I'm in the ego, right? So then it's an immediate slap in the face of like, oh, I must be in that space. So
Yeah.
I, I don't know if that makes sense.
It does, it does, it does. And I want to bring it back to another thing that we were talking about, the wordiness piece, because I know for a lot of people, it is tied to that when it comes to the money story. And here's what I was shown as well, which blew me away. And literally, when I was shown all of this, it wasn't even the mention of money wasn't even there. But it's funny how that's part of it. It's really money is part of any other material abundance one wants.
Mhm.
And how it was shown to me is that you have all these people and experiences, and you could throw spirit in there as well if you want, that are just out there giving you or wanting to give you, wanting to bring abundance in your life. But because you're looking for this abundance in only just one or another, one or two or three different specific ways. So, for example, in my case, I just want money, right? So it needs to come in this way, and it has to be this amount, and it has to be whatever. Like you put rules around it. All of a sudden, you don't get to see all the other abundance that's available around you and what other people are or something outside of you wants to bring it in to you.
Mhm.
And the way it was shown to me was, imagine this scenario is almost like you have a funnel, and in the funnel, all these people, all these things they want to give you, could be nature, could be whatever, goes in the funnel. And of course, it all gets funneled down. And there's a very tiny exit point. But you may not be accepting, like in that moment, because of your wordness. Maybe you feel like I'm not good enough to accept this. All of a sudden, the funnel starts to clog because the things that are waiting for you to accept them, but you're not accepting them. So two things happen the way it was shown to me. One is that, of course, the trickle that comes through is very little. So depending on your situation right now with money, you might have no trickle coming through, or it might be a tiny bit, so you have some. And at the same time, the funnel can only hold so many people or experiences that they want to give you. So others that want to come in to give you, they have nowhere to go because again, it's just a trickle, tiny bit comes through. So how they showed it to me was that, what if you were to open up that funnel and start accepting whatever it is the way it comes, and release whatever, if you're not in congruence with something that's being offered to you, accept it and release it and share it with others. And all of a sudden this flow starts going, where you're going to start attracting more and more because you're the person that now accepts. And in accepting is also giving, because there's only so much you can have. Anyway, actually, that was when they showed me that visual, and it's like it was tied to my worthiness. And the a lot of the stuff I wasn't accepting was tied to like, I'm not good enough, or I wanted a specific way, or I expected a certain way, right? Or it's not good enough for what I am in my life right now. Like I'm so much higher than you, so I can't accept that. You're not good enough for me. So
Mhm.
all these things tying together, it's like, oh, so it's
Mhm.
about, like you say, seeing the story for what it is and releasing it. Because when you
Mhm.
do it, then you can start accepting all these things that otherwise you would have not seen. And I think I gave you this example, which blew me away now with the retreat I'm hosting in November in Costa Rica and around the food, right? I think I mentioned that to you, but for those that don't know,
Yeah, you shared it on the
essentially,
podcast.
yeah, and that's going to go live in a few weeks. But for those listening right now, if you're interested, essentially, and we keep the story short because you'll hear the full story on the podcast. I'm hosting this amazing retreat in Costa Rica in November, and we have a private chef. And as you can imagine, having a private chef costs a lot of money. And I was also encouraged by Spirit to look at pricing my retreat with a model of pay from the heart, which meant that now I had to, let's call it, get clever with how we're going to make sure that this retreat is not going to bleed money for everyone. It's going to bring abundance for everyone. So then we had to look at cutting costs when it came to the private chef. And I put a question out to the universe. I said, I need help with this. Help me out. And sure enough, 2 weeks ago, someone reaches out to me through a mutual friend offering to be the private chef because she has a business doing that and whatnot. But long story short, some things weren't aligning. And I was like, nah, that's not for me. And it wasn't until I sat with it in reflection that I realized, wait a second. And to your point, Ashley, it's like perception is everything. It's like, am I looking at this the right way? Or not even the right way? Am I looking at this from with an abundance mindset, with a love mindset? Or am I looking at it from a fear mindset? Because I was totally in my ego and fear, be like, no, that's not looking exactly how I wanted, so I can't accept it. So now that thing was stuck in my funnel, blocking other things of abundance of coming through. And once I shifted my perspective, coming from a place of love, not fear, it opened up the doorway to a partnership I never even imagined. That's going to not only give a better experience to everyone that attends, but it's also going to bring the cost down, which allows us to impact even more people and bring more abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And we have these examples in our life. How many doors do we close through our perception and not even realize, or how many doors we don't even see because of our perception?
Yeah. What I hear is really it's a issue of staying in the present moment, right? Like Eckhart Tolle's Be Here Now is an amazing book and it teaches you how to really access the present moment. But I think the thing it misses is that's where you want to be all the time. It's not a magical back pocket tool that Eckhart, that really Be Here Now explains, but instead a state of being 24/7.
Yeah.
And what I hear is like, you weren't in the moment, and how we know you weren't in the moment is because you allowed past stories to come in to cloud your judgment of what it should look like in the future, right? You had already preconceived what your future should look like, so at no
Exactly.
point were you ever in the present moment, which is where the flow of abundance exists. True abundance and the flow of it, which is eternal love. And it doesn't always look like money. It doesn't always look like the
Oh,
things you think it should look like, but you have to be in the present moment to access that flow. Um, yeah, so to me, what I hear is it was not an issue of anything other than not allowing yourself to be fully in the present moment where abundance is received.
such a good reminder and a different perspective I hadn't considered.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
mean,
let's,
I know for me, when I'm in the present moment, that's when life flows. That's when things are ebbing and flowing. But the second I start to plan for the future or plan for the past out of this state of fear, right? Like sometimes in the present moment, you will receive inspiration to do something that's for the future. Like an example, when you found that Airbnb, it
Mhm.
wasn't that you were living in the future, it was in that present moment, you had an inspired idea
Yes,
to book that, right?
exactly.
But if instead, let's say you entered that day and you were like, I have to find an Airbnb or it's never going to happen. Like, I have to find this, blah, blah. That is not inspired. That is you worried about the future, right? Living in the future. And you would have spent hours looking for something and maybe found something that, who knows? Like, it could have been a huge whole mess, but it wasn't inspired. And inspiration can only happen in the moment because spirit only lives in the present moment. Spirit doesn't live in the future or the past. It doesn't exist. It's all happening at once.
Mhm.
Ego. Ego is the past and the future. The ego does not exist in the present moment. So the
Mm,
ego never wants you in the present moment because how can it control you if you're living in a place it can't access?
yeah.
Can't.
What a powerful reminder, Ashley. And that's such a beautiful example, right? Because I remember the day when the inspiration came through. You know what? It's time to set up the retreat.
You just went,
Yeah, I mean, like people look at it and say, "How did you make it happen?" In like it was like less than 12 hours from. I mean, the idea was there. The idea was there before, but there was no intention before that to be like, oh, it has to be, or it has to be now or these dates. And all of a sudden, like you said, it just happened. I'm
mhm,
browsing Airbnb and I'm like, I want to see what's available.
mhm.
And like you said, being in the present. And here's the funny thing, because now you mentioned that there were no money stories in the present moment. There wasn't like, oh, this is
There can't be. A
right. And it's
story is
like,
something from the past.
but then it came later, right? As I came out
Mhm,
of that, something happened. I had to jump on calls or whatever it was. I remember the day, right? And then all of a sudden, fear started to creep up. It's like, oh, but
mhm.
have you considered this? What if this happens? What if this doesn't happen? All this, and it's like, that's interesting.
Because you moved back into the ego. I mean,
Yeah.
so many people ask Patrick and I, they're like, how did you decide that you guys are going to up and leave and go to Southeast Asia? And one day we were like, how did that happen? And we can't remember. And the reason why we can't remember is because it was inspired. So it wasn't like this thought process of us being like, oh, what should we do? Let's do, like it wasn't a very ego strategic laid out thing. It was an inspired thought that we followed through with. And now this is where we're headed. Right. And everything is aligned as long as we stay in that inspired moment. But yeah, you enter back to the ego. You went back into the state of fear, and that's what happens when we're on this journey, um, until we really begin to step more out than in. Like, more of us is in the illusion right now, so you'll spend more time in the ego than you will in spirit. But as you continue to unravel from the ego, it becomes more and more until you're mainly in spirit, and it's like you've got a tiny little toe still in the door that's keeping you here. So it makes sense. But those are the moments then we're like, oh, these are the stories that Ashley talked about coming up, right? These are the stories Ashley and Constantine were
Mhm.
mentioning. Like, I did this amazing thing that felt very inspired, but now I'm feeling shame and guilt around it. Well, the shame and guilt is the stories. It's the ego trying to stop me. This is what they were talking about that you see for what they are, which is the stories, and you hand them over and you ask for a shift in perspective, right? That's what I'm talking about. Instead of identifying with the stories and going down the rabbit hole of all the what ifs, that's just feeding the ego more and more, making it stronger and stronger. And it'll pull you further away from your inspired idea. And that's why, you might not move forward on an inspired idea. That's why, a multitude of things. But yeah.
So the question is, how do you bring yourself back in the moment, right? Because I would imagine that unless, of course, you're fully enlightened, you're always going to have this journey of like you're in the moment and then you're not, then you're in the moment, then you're not, right? And of
Mhm,
course, for many of us, it's like a lot less in the moment than not.
mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing. We were talking about this in Lighthouse the other day, is like a lot of the tactics we're taught in the personal development movement. It's like everything has to be set up perfectly, right? To enter this state of like higher level consciousness, because that's a very much thing. But when it comes to ego and spirit, spirit is your innate state.
Mhm.
So you can't be in both at the same time, but you can switch back and forth really quickly. So I think of like multitasking. I mean, most scientific evidence shows there is no such thing as multitasking. I can't remember what it's actually called, but you move really quickly from task to
Yeah,
task, is
yeah,
what's actually
exactly.
happening. Right? So to me, like that is a direct like correlation of how you can move from ego to spirit. You can go really quick. Like it can be a matter of seconds, and nothing needs to change other than your perception. And the only way to change that is to ask for it to be changed. Like it's not you changing it, it's you handing it over. Spirit's always waiting. Your guides, your highest self wants nothing more than for you to realize you never have to suffer again. But the problem is you're not willing to hand stuff over. We want to hold on to stuff. And this is where you start to call your own BS meter, and you get radically honest with yourself of, there's many moments in my life where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so uncomfortable. Why isn't spirit taking this from me? And then I'll sit with it and get honest with myself, and it'll be like, because I want to. I want to sit in this shit right now. I want to have every excuse to project out and to not allow love in because I don't feel in this moment ready. And that's okay too. But when you are ready, no call has ever gone unanswered. The problem is no one's calling, right? Like if you are not truly ready to hand it over, then that's why it's not being handed over. It has nothing to do with spirit not taking it. It has nothing to do with your highest self not taking it and giving you a different perspective. It is you are still rooted in the need for that in that
Yeah,
moment.
yeah, I love that. The reminder. Wow. Okay, Ashley. We unpacked some pretty deep stuff here. So let's bring it back to the money story
Yeah.
or the money aspect of it. Let's maybe expand it to material abundance.
Okay. What are
Just
your
I'm
thoughts?
reading through to see what else comes up for me here. The question keeps coming up. It's like, what is it here to teach us or to remind us, right? Because it feels like it because it has such a hold on everyone in society. Like I don't think maybe one in a billion might not have a challenge in that area. So to me, when it's something so common among so many, there's a spiritual, a massive spiritual reason behind it. And I know
Mhm.
we cover some of this, but I'm curious because that's what keeps coming up for me to ask that question. What is it trying to teach us or remind us of, rather, that we're
Mhm.
missing and we're not seeing?
To me, it's forgiveness. To me, everything here has is for forgiveness. And I think what I've missed along the path, like say in personal development and the new age movement and higher level consciousness when it came with money, is I just shifted my story to a more positive, loving friend story. But the deal is like money, like I said at the beginning, if it has any story, it has control over you. So I think the big thing we're all missing and why we continue to struggle with it is because we are just constantly trying to unpack the stories and shift the stories instead of releasing the stories and not giving a crap what they mean or not mean, but knowing that money is not real. Money and worthiness is not real. Like you are wholly abundant in truth of what you are. So when we sit and we, spend hours in shadow work and in all these different times of focus, yes, it can bring light, but the problem is not bring light. It can bring awareness to things we weren't aware of. But the problem is, it's like there's this line that you only need so much awareness to release it to spirit and to allow yourself to be freed from it. But when we cross that line, then we're like ego analyzing it. And then that's actually rooting us deeper in a relationship with whatever it is, and making it more and more a part of us than making it less a part of us. So that's my thoughts that comes is like it's forgiveness, it's true forgiveness, which is the realization that it is not real and it has no hold over you and it has no place in who you truly are, meaning no story.
Meaning no story. I love that. Okay, Ashley. Wow. Okay. No, I have nothing else to add. I mean, it resonates with me. It's something that it's coming up a lot for me lately, right? For good reason, and more get more to reflect on. And I'll go back to
Yeah.
re-listen to some parts because there was some deep stuff in there that we talked about.
Well, I think the pieces too, like what is this could be seen as like ignoring or avoidance, right? But that's just the other side of the pendulum. So that's where it's not about ignoring or avoiding it. It's not about giving it special anything. It's just really about where it just is. The favorite statement, it just is.
Mhm,
Meaning it just is something that appears to be projected in this illusion that truly has no hold over me. Either way, it has no story in my truth of what I am. Yeah, it's kind of like in a video game, right? If you and I both played Grand Theft Auto today and you were like a bazillionaire in Grand Theft Auto and I was, had a $10 on the corner, like, does that matter when we leave the video game? No. And did it really even matter in the video game? No, we'd probably be making jokes and stuff and it would be lighthearted and it wouldn't be like, oh my God, Constantine, I don't know how I'm going to eat in Grand Theft Auto. And you're going to be like, well, I'm going to eat $7,000 sushi. Um, yeah. And I know Smoker X very much is wanting to make lots of money and I get it. And maybe this isn't the corner of YouTube for you. And I understand you need to pay rent and but it's all about how you view it, right? I think me and Constantine, our conversations are more at like a metaphysical mind level instead of like the tangible. We're not saying stop paying your bills. We're not saying that. We're talking more at the level of the mind where the healing occurs and then allowing what happens at the level of form to unfold, right? Like you still have a job, you still do these things, but the weight you're placing on it is what is mattering, right? Like if you have to pay your rent and you don't have the money in your account, do you think it's going to matter if you sit and feel anxious about it versus not feel anxious? Is that going to change the amount of money in your account? No. So we're talking about how you can instead sit in this place of non anxiety versus being anxious about it, having all this weight on it.
Yeah.
It's
And
more
what's
at the
interesting
level
is
of the mind.
the less weight you have. I mean, it doesn't. You can look at this not just money, anything in your life,
Yeah.
and you have examples of this. So if money is not a good example to look at, for most of us, it's not. Look at other examples where you put less weight. A relationship, maybe with someone or something,
Mhm.
and what happened then when you put less weight on it? I would imagine, from my perspective, is I have so many examples in my life. That's when miracles and magic happened. So all of a sudden, the relationship either ran its course and that was it, or it
Mhm.
became more magical
But your
because there was less
perspective is
weight.
what had shifted
Yeah.
and allowed it.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's all about the mind. I mean, if we want to hustle and get rich quick, there's tons of books out there about how to do that. But I promise you, it will not bring you happiness. Like maybe in the moment you'll have like it's like when you go buy a brand new T-shirt and you're like, I love this T-shirt so much, I'm gonna wear it every single day until you've worn it 4 times and you're like, I need a new T-shirt, right? That's a direct example of how money can't buy happiness. Period. Like it can buy dopamine hits. Yeah. So those 4 times you wore that t-shirt, you got a dopamine hit. But that's not what Constantine and I are talking about. Constantine and I are talking about eternal joy and happiness that isn't fleeting. It doesn't matter where you are financially or in a relationship, but you can truly cultivate this ongoing joy and happiness through whatever. I mean, right? I mean, unless
Yeah.
Constantine, you have
No, 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 I agree with you 100%. I mean, I had the money. So, I mean, I've been successful most of my adult life because I worked hard and I followed all the rules, went to school because I grew up extremely poor. And even when I moved to Canada, there wasn't a lot of, let's call it material abundance. And then, of course, went to school, got degrees, followed in, like you said, there's many books, studied those, climbed the corporate ladder, right? Have successful careers and entrepreneurial adventures too. And the money was there, but there was no happiness and fulfillment. I mean, the reason you and I are even talking here today is because of that realization about 4 years ago. After getting a
Mhm.
massive promotion at the company I was working with back then and the role I was, and then I was like, oh, but this makes me feel even more empty than before because guess what? Once a distraction of chasing that next shiny object fades, the reality sits in or comes back in, which is like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm actually empty on the inside. I have no joy or fulfillment. Yeah, I can buy a shinier toy now or shinier toys. I can buy better alcohol to distract myself or better food, whatever the case might be. But the emptiness is still there. And I think the best example is to look at anyone that's wealthy. how miserable they actually are in their life. And you see this with actors, you see this with professional athletes, you see this with, billionaires, millionaires, doesn't really matter. Because if
Mhm.
the chase is always for more, which is what I used to do, more of whatever, then you're never going
Mhm.
to reach the finish line.
Mhm.
You're not going to be happy doing so,
Yeah. Yeah, there's a
which
really
is,
good documentary. I think it's Tom Shadyac. I think I have that right. He's a director. He directed all the Jim Carrey movies. Him and Jim Carrey kind of put Jim Carrey on the map together, and he blew up really huge and had this massive, I mean, like ridiculous house. And he did this documentary. I think it's called I Am. I can find it and put it a link in there, but it's so beautiful because it's a representation of that. He had it all. He had this massive house, and he remembers standing in the empty hallway being like, what is this all for? And then that's when he went on a journey all across the entire world, talking to some of the leading spiritual gurus out there that had no clue who he was, right? So his clout wasn't there of like, oh, you're Tom Shady, you did Jim Carrey. They're like, who's Jim Carrey? We don't care. These spiritual people, and he really found this different way of understanding. He found this truth of what it's really about, and he ended up selling everything. He lives in a trailer now, and is just super happy because he shifted what where happiness was. He
yeah,
realized where it actually was, which was within, not outside of him. I mean, he was successful. He had money, he had a name, he had all the things everybody's constantly striving for. Um, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of homeless people are the happiest people out there. Actually, if you Google, Constantine, I think you know more about this. Like the happiest people in the world are this like tiny tribe in Africa that have like nothing. If you like Google, there's a whole thing about it. But yeah, I am is really good. Helps you to see that like everything is your perspective. I mean, even feeling hungry is a perspective. And we could go down, the deep rabbit hole of, Jesus didn't eat and he was on the cross and he was being beaten and he laughed and, he wasn't hungry and all these other things because he had figured out that it was all at the level of the mind. That's how he healed. That's how Constantine is learning to heal, is or remembering that you can heal actually, because it's all at the level of the mind. You're meeting people at the mind where these stories are made, and you're helping them to untie these stories at the level of the mind. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's really, it goes deep. I mean, we could be unraveling this quite a bit more if we wanted to, but as we're coming up on the hour here, Ashley, we want to thank, of course, everyone that has been listening in and contributing as well. It is a journey that each of us get to embark on, and the best thing that keeps coming to me not the best thing, an important message that keeps coming to me all the time from my guides, from your guides, whatever you want to call it, it's that it is an individual journey, but at the same time, it's not meant to be done alone.
Mhm.
And I mean, if you're here, you know that because you're listening to us, which means you're not choosing to do this alone. You're choosing to go on the path with other people.
Mhm.
And it's about finding your tribe. You're not going to agree with
Mhm.
everyone. You're not going to like everyone. Not everyone is going to like you and agree with you. Find the people that you resonate with, and that will allow you to shift those perspectives to bring more forgiveness, as Ashley mentioned, and find your own answers.
Mhm.
And that's it. That's all I have to
Yeah.
add.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. And those that you don't resonate with and that prickle you are forgiveness opportunities, right? So I think it's just this constant just movement of trust and listening and leading with love, and meeting love with love and cries for love with love is really where it's at. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, thank you for tuning in, and appreciate everyone. And it was so fun to be back live again, Constantine. I feel
yeah.
like
Yes.
we have so much fun and so much deep conversations.
Oh, and my perspectives get shifted all the time too. It gives me more awareness of stuff to look at and be like, okay, well, time to release this now. Time to ask for help.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome,
Such
everyone.
a
Well, we'll see you around. I'm sure Ashley and I will go live again soon, and you have a beautiful rest of your weekend, wherever you are, and you know where to find us. Unleash thyself for me, Big Miracle Energy for Ashley, and let's stay in touch.